What are we looking at here?
We're looking at a 4-summer project. I had no idea what I was getting into. I never did any carpenter work of this capacity. I got in over my head, but I had promised my grandsons to do this, so I had to finish it.
My grandpa has been working on it for a long time, but he says he'll never be finished. He says it'll never be finished.
This is my sister, Christy.
I'm the proud owner.
Her house is just over yonder. She moved up to Maine years ago, and it was around that time when my dad said, hey, what about a treehouse for these kids? And you built me and Christy a treehouse when we were kids.
Yes.
And that was pretty fancy.
What do you think of your new treehouse, Frank?
I think it's already nice. And we only got the floor up.
This was a little more challenging because it all had to be staged in Westport and brought up here. I was afraid that the way that I had it supported by the trees would kill the trees, so I suspended it on pilings. This was one of the original trees that it was clamped to, and those 2 trees in the back and this one here. But I wanted this to last for a long time, so I wound up leaving it on there, making these supports, jacking it up with these screws until I took the weight off the original supports, and then I continued to build a treehouse. I had my 2 grandsons helped me whenever they could, and sometimes Nana.
So you brought all material from Massachusetts up to Maine?
On the roof of my truck, every piece, all the metal pots that I made. I wanted it to look like a Harry Potter kind of woodsy looking and to blend in. And I didn't want it to be an eyesore in the yard.
This support system down here is incredible. There's a lot of like design and engineering that's gone into that. That's pretty awesome.
We wound up bridging it in both directions, and that really made it rigid. We got a little guy here on the tree. I don't know if you can see that face. This is a big cedar tree that grows right up alongside it. And when I first started this, I thought I could see something moving in the tree, and it was a raccoon. There was like 6 heads. It was the mother and a litter. And the next morning I came and they were all gone. Because of the snow, I wanted to get it off this deck that I made. It's the deck and then a subfloor. That door I bought in Westport at a farm for 25 bucks. I thought it was appropriate. It's got that old wavy glass in it. And that gray frame was on the other side of the door. So I changed it around because I thought it would look better like that. I built the frame around it. I never built a door frame in my life. The door actually opens and closes pretty good. It's got a tin roof. I'm all alone here, and the roof is over 45 degrees to keep the snow off, and you can't climb on it. So I had to build staging on the outside to get up there. And then staging planks were too heavy for me to put out on the brackets that hold the staging. So I wound up making 2x4 frames and putting plywood on it that I could handle physically. And then I built ladders off of that to go up the roof. And of course, every day they would go to the beach and I would stay here working, and I always thought that if I go, it's going to be a long day on the ground. That's my old deck from 177, and it goes all the way up to the ceiling. Those windows are cheap windows, aluminum frames, that have made chicken coops and playhouses. This picnic table that I built out of, they call it live boards. It's the edge from the sawmill, and I tried to make it look old. I painted the ends black, and I tried to make the seat look dirty, but it's all actually new wood. You know, I got some drawers up on the wall there, and some Believe, that kind of stuff. Half of the room is got a ceiling so that they'd have a second floor. Just the screws. There's a lot of screws in this thing. I would say there's 75 pounds of screws in here, you know? Yeah. Because I don't know, I wasted a lot of wood. This is just an old piece of 3x3 that was in the yard. It was actually pressure treated, but it sat around so long, it got old looking. It's all the stuff that was laying in the yard or in the woods on 177.
What gave you the confidence that you could do it?
Well, I mean, nobody can say you're doing it wrong as long as it don't fall down. You know
That's
what I mean?
true.
You know, I built this subfloor, and then I'm not going to have any help to stand up the framing when it's done. So I built them like cards, a frame for one wall laid down on the floor. Then I built the framing for the other wall on top of it. And then the sides next, and then the next one. So now it's time to stand them all up alone. So I wound up standing up one gable end and tying it off to a tree, and then the opposite end, and then I opened it up like a box. I squoze them together with clamps, and then I tried to square them off the best I could, and then I started nailing them to the floor. The roof truss were a whole nother game. I built them on the driveway in Westport, trying to stand them up alone, and now you're up high here. I'm up like 30 feet.
Yeah.
Then when that was all done, next challenge is to put the plywood roof on. Well, how am I going to get the sheets of plywood up there?
Yeah.
Impossible, alone. I cut the 4x8 sheets of plywood into 2x8 sheets of plywood. I split them down the middle. As the roof got more closed in, I had to slide the sheet out and slide it into place through a hole. The last pieces I was working out of like a little square. And then when I was all done, I just patched the square from outside. Then it came time to do the tin. I can't even explain it to you. I don't even know how I did it. You know, I was balancing on ladders until I got to the point where I had to work on the peak. I have a 40-foot ladder, but because of the pitch of the roof, I would never get to the peak. That's when I made these staging on the outside and made these temporary ladders and went up there and kept my fingers crossed. And then the last things to do were to try to get it safe for the kids. See, I use these white pine, that rough cut board. It's cheap stuff.
So why not get all the material up here in Maine?
Well, that's a good point. Before I bought my first piece of rough pine, I thought, I'm not going to cut all that stuff up here. In Maine, it's going to be cheap. I mean, the amount of plywood that comes out of this state is unbelievable. So I went to a local lumber yard that advertised that they sold rough cut wood. So I went in and I asked the guy, I said, you sell rough cut wood? He said, well, we do to order. You know, I need some 10 by 12 footers, you know, one by 10 by 12s. I said, well, you don't have it here? He said, we only cut like hardwoods. I said, oh, okay. Where can I get it? He says, I can't tell you. I said, what do you mean? You don't know? He says, no, I don't know any places off the top of my head. So that was enough for me. I thought he'd say, oh, God, you go up the street here, and there's one on both sides of the street as far as you can see. I didn't put any insulation in here because I was afraid that if moisture builds down in there, the pine will rot. I wanted to leave the walls open so they can vent. We've come up here after snow, and everything is dry. The roof has got enough overhang where it pushes the snow right off the edge. That's about it, John. I don't know what else to tell you. So
That's amazing. That's incredible. Really, really nice work.
well, when you're doing it for your grandchildren, you know what I mean? All I could think of was my grandfather promised us a treehouse, but he never finished it. Not under any conditions.
Have you been spending a lot of time in it?
Yes. It is amazing. I remember when there was just a bunch of trees. And now it's a beautiful house.